Can you tell everyone what actually goes into the title search? What are you looking for?
I think probably the easiest way to do that is to break it down step by step. So first, when we get your contract, we're going to locate the parcels that are actually being bought and sold. We're going to find the deeds for those. And that seems like an obvious first step, but the main reason is that we are going to send out to the title companies and solicit them for a prior policy of owner's title insurance. And the reason we do that is because in North Carolina, it is common accepted practice to tack on to prior policies of owner's title insurance. And the reason is, depending on when that prior policy was issued, it can save the buyer money because you get a reduced rate of insurance and you get the benefit of all those prior years of insurance that you essentially just add on to. If we get a prior policy, then we have the benefit of a shortened search period, which means we can get your results back to you faster. You get the shorter or the least expensive policy price being able to tack on. And like I said, you get the benefit of like the prior policies having been issued that you tack on to. So from there, we move on to searching the relevant time period. If we don't get a prior policy, the North Carolina Marketable Title Act is 30 years. So we got to go back at least 30 years. If the link in the chain takes us further back, it could be, I had one yesterday that I ended up having to go back in the 1800s. So we get the prior policy, and when we have our defined search period, then we find tax information. So we're looking for, are there any delinquencies, not just for this year, but for the prior 10 years, because those tax liens can be foreclosed upon. Are there any deferrals? Say you got farm use, and you're not having to pay a portion of the taxes. You don't get those taxes forgiven. When you sell the property out of that farm use program, you have to pay the rollback taxes. And sellers are often shocked by this. They're like, what do you mean? I've got to pay how much for 5 years worth of taxes or whatever it may be. And then any exemptions, like an elderly exemption, because those are going to go away when the new buyer purchases. And we have to disclose that and calculate taxes based on what it will be, not what it is.
Right.
So after the taxes, we're looking at the appraisal card to figure out, is this single family residential? Is this a mobile home? When was the last year that it was modified? Because that's relevant to figure out, do we have a lien agent appointed? So we do all of those things and figure out what the appraised value is, tax situation. Then we move on to our clerk's checks. So that would be register of deeds, judgments, bankruptcies. Then we're going to we have a North Carolina Unified Lien Agent System that we check. So register of deeds, what we're looking for are any conveyances out of the owners to see, did they give away any portion of the property? We're looking for encumbrances like deeds of trust. Did they borrow money against the property? Then we see, did that deed of trust get paid off? If not, it's still open. It has to be satisfied at closing. Any easements granted, restrictions. So restrictions are a big one. You should be looking at restrictions before you go under contract, because otherwise, if you find a restriction you don't like, you've given up your due diligence. But that is also something that can be revealed in a title search. When it comes to bankruptcies, we're looking to see if the property has been conveyed during an active bankruptcy, or there is an active bankruptcy right now, you have to have an order of the court to allow you to do that. So we're looking to make sure those orders have been properly filed. Judgments. So judgments, we have 2 different systems in North Carolina right now. So that's where we find out if any of the owners have judgments against them. So those are things that we're looking for. Claims of lien. Some may have been expired, so we'll have to look in to see if they're expired. Lawsuits that are pending, so that we have to check to see if they become a judgment before closing. Estates are going to be shown in there. Any special proceedings for like lunacy, anything like that. So those are the things we're looking for in judgments. I already talked about bankruptcies, and then North Carolina lien, the unified system. Anytime you have a site where work is being done, they're supposed to post the lien agent, so that you know where to go file notice of lien. And that way we know who needs to have a lien waiver signed at closing. So those are the main systems we're looking for. Sometimes depending on what you find, you might have to keep looking further. But those are the main ones that you need to be able to draft a preliminary title opinion. So that's the next thing we do. After a preliminary title opinion has been drafted, we send it to the title company that's going to be issuing the policy, and they prepare something called a title commitment. And it is showing the requirements to be able to issue the policy. For example, if there's a judgment, they're not going to issue a policy unless there's evidence that the judgment has been paid. If there's a person who's selling, who's married, they're not going to issue a policy unless the spouse signs off on the conveyance. There's an estate. There's other requirements. It's the open estate indemnity agreement.
So
all
this
these
is
other
really
things.
good for the realtors to know that like we're not making stuff up, and like this is
It's not our whims.
Well, and also we're having to wait until we get this back to know like exactly who and how and things need to get signed or taken care of.
So the title commitment gives us requirements and exceptions. That tells us, what's the amount of the policy. So if there's some claim, how much are they going to pay up to? The things that have to be done for them to issue the policy, and things that they do not insure over. Things of record, like easements, that's of record. That's out there. That Duke has a utility easement on your property so you can have power. The title company is not going to insure over that matter. They're also not going to insure over things that you can find on a survey. It's one of the biggest reasons why we encourage getting a survey, because as a buyer, if you put your head in the sand and basically like, I don't want to know, well, the title company's not going to protect you from that. You could have found out. So if you get a survey, find an issue, get it resolved before closing, great. If you don't choose not to get a survey and you find out there's an issue after, you're dealing with that on your own dime. So after the commitment is issued, really we're off to the races, going to closing. You pay your premiums on the closing statement. There's some things we have to do after closing to get the final policies issued. So that's providing lien waivers, deeds of trust, really showing that requirements list. We have to provide evidence to the title company that all those requirements were met, and then they will issue the final policy.